Hello, happy Toes Day to you. Today is April 6th, 2021. I'm Jamie Allen Bishop with Soul Heart Entertainment here, coming to you live from my home office. I'm back home, so happy. Today and throughout the month of April, we're going to talk about communication toes, which are the second finger toes, pointer finger toes, and they're the air toes. So hello, everybody who just joined. Please go ahead and let me know you're here so I can acknowledge you, and thank you for being here. Communication, analytical behavior, as well as creativity all show up in that pointer finger toe. So the second toe, the air toe, the one right next to the ether toe. So air toe is all about communication, creativity, analytical behavior. It, of course, has to do with the throat chakra and showing up as your authentic self. Hello, honey. Thank you for being here. Hi, Cindy Rose. Thank you for being here. So if you have any questions about the pointer finger toes, let me know in the comments below and I will definitely address those. In the meantime, we'll talk a little bit about one of the things that shows up as the creative or analytical behavior in toes and how creativity might show up there as well. So when we're looking at the toes, we're looking at the shape of the toes, we're looking at the direction of the toes, we're looking at the color of the toes, we're looking at maybe the padding of the toes. We're looking at so many different things. And one of the things that I look for when I'm doing a toe reading or working with a client who's trying to overcome a communication challenge is difference from one foot to the next, because the right foot is about our external self and how we show up in the world, and our left foot is about our internal self or how we show up for our higher selves. So when the two are not in alignment with each other, we can really struggle with communication. Let me show you what I mean here. So on these toes, we're talking right foot and left foot. If you look at the second toe, you can see that they're pretty different from foot to foot. This toe comes straight out and then sort of takes a turn to the baby toe, which is the future side. And the padding is a little bit more round, okay? So this person tries really hard and makes a solid effort to show up in the world with a little bit gentler communication than if you look at the left foot, it's pretty straight across. The padding on that toe, it's pretty straight across. So she's probably pretty hard on herself when she has that conversation inside. So when she looks in the mirror, she's probably pretty hard on herself. So that, when somebody's really hard on themselves, do you think it shows up in their external communication as well? Or do you think that they can really, really show up without, and you know, when I think of hard on themselves, I think of a very critical voice, that critical voice inside that tells us we're not good enough, or we're not there yet, or we can't, we won't, that kind of thing, right? So do you think it shows up the same from foot to, if you're hard on yourself internally, do you think that you're probably hard on people externally also? I would say 9 times out of 10, yes, definitely. Every once in a while, you'll find somebody who is hard on themselves, but shows up really gentle and kind in the world. The thing is that we can sometimes find a wolf in sheep's clothing when it comes to communication, because that internal dialogue is maybe how shall I say, it's maybe a little bit kinder than maybe the external dialogue. Anyway, my point is when the toes aren't showing up the same from foot to foot, from left to right, you can really find an imbalance in the way that that person shows up creatively, communication wise, as well as how they analyze situations. Okay, so for example, okay, let's see what's going on with these feet. So when we're looking at the right side, we're looking at our external self side. When we're looking at the left side, we're looking at our internal self side. So this gentleman has much straighter on the outside and a little bit more gentle on the inside. See how it rounds out on the inside? So he probably has kind of the opposite communication style as this set of female feet, where the padding on this set of feet is a little bit more round on the external self side and a little bit straighter across. So the roundness has to do with kind of beating around or it can, I shouldn't say it does. It can mean that they beat around the bush a lot. It can mean that they don't go straight to the point. It can mean that they just want everybody to get along, right? We all know somebody who fits into all three of those categories, or somebodies, I should say. And when the padding goes straight across, what you're looking at is somebody who's very blunt, they're to the point, they maybe don't hold back, they maybe don't have, oh, hi, Susie, thank you for being here, yay. Yeah, when their padding goes straight across, they're maybe communicating a little bit harsher, a little bit more realist, at least in their own mind, right? So what that looks like, Susie, I'll show you, is where the padding on, we're talking about the second toe, which is the air toe, which is all about communication and creativity and how we analyze things. And that blunt toe, or that toe that comes straight across, as opposed to the toe that's a little bit rounder, that's the difference, is when that toe is straight across, there's a little bit more straight to the point, a little bit, kind of blunt. I sometimes think that there's a little bit of sharpness to the way that they communicate or the way that they analyze things. Hi, Tracy. Oh, so glad you're here, sweetheart. What about a longer than your big toe communication toe? Okay, great question. So when your communication toe is longer than your big toe, what you're talking about is somebody who is absolutely destined to be a communicator. And what that looks like, for some people, that might be writing. They might not be, they might be really, really shy and they don't want to get up on stage and they don't want to, interact with an audience, but they're here to communicate something. The other thing that it can mean in the creative world is that they might be creatively analytical, right? So I think of our math geniuses and the people who, do all kinds of amazing calculations. Almost always your CPA types, the people that do our taxes and keep our books for us, those people will almost always have a second toe that's longer and almost bigger, almost, I'm looking for an image. So, where can I find? Well, actually this one probably is a pretty good indication. So the right toe, see how her second toe is longer and it comes out, that very tip of it is kind of chunkier or a little bit more bulbous, we call, right? So that is the sign of somebody who's really, really analytical, and they're going to look at every detail, and they're going to be really good communicators about those details. The thing that sometimes stumps them is when the big picture gets in the way of that analytical side, okay? Or they can see a vision, but they don't know how to put it into practice, right? They get stuck on the details is what ends up happening, is they're so focused on that analytical side of things that it's really hard to gain momentum and to push that train forward, right? Train of life, metaphors. I always use metaphors. Whereas when we look at toes like this, what we're looking at is toes that kind of come down toward the surface. And when they come down toward the surface, they're maybe straight across a little bit more, or they're, kind of grabbing on a little bit. And yeah, so when those toes grab on, you're talking about a little bit of insecurity there. So maybe in the external world, they're a little bit insecure about what they say or how they say it. Hi, Curtis. Thank you so much for being here. We're doing a little bit of toe reading today. So they might be insecure about communication or how they're showing up creatively in the world. Maybe they want to be more creative and they don't know how to go about doing that, or maybe they feel like they're not creative. But if their pointer finger toe is longer than that big toe, they're meant to be. They're meant to be more creative, more analytical, and more communicative than, say, somebody without the extra long toe. So they're meant to follow that path and really shine and show up in the world. Okay, does that make sense? Cindy, I think it was Cindy Rose who said that question. Susie, let me take a look at that. It's so funny that I am good friends with a CPA, and it's so true. Yes. Big vision, like they probably have amazing big visions, but they get lost in the details because those analytical pieces of the pie, kind of take them on that squirrel track, like squirrel. They get sidetracked. So what happens when the second toe ends up with some sort of, oh yes, absolutely. I'm happy to answer any questions. I love answering questions. So if you have questions about feet, please feel free to ask them. I'm more than happy to answer them. I'm a big vision girl and not detailed. So you probably make a perfect team with this CPA friend of yours because she can see the details that you're like, whatever. But details are just as important. The problem is, or the thing that can hold us back when we get so focused on the details, we can't, move forward with that big vision. And when we're too big vision oriented, we might miss the details that can really, really help us gain momentum in our businesses, especially if we're entrepreneurs, right? So what happens when we have fungus, or our nails start to split or bruise or show signs of weakness? And forgive the word that I'm using, but I have a reason for using that word, right? I'm going to show you these it's runnersworld.com that I got these images off of. So kudos to them for posting images. And it's funny because they post them as images of ugly feet, right? If you know anything about my toe reading, you know that I do not see ugly in anybody's feet. I see the things that are holding us back. So I think it's all really, really exciting and fascinating. But runners, because they're sweating inside their shoes and socks, oftentimes end up with some sort of thing that ends up eating at their feet, right? Well, the fungus that eats away at your toenails and toe beds and the toes themselves, if we can really, really think about it from that analytical point of view, oftentimes that's about how our thoughts, probably while we're running, end up eating away at us. So they eat at that destined path that we're supposed to be living, or that, I say this with the idea that we are here to serve a purpose in life. And I come from that belief system that every single one of us has a destined path. And when we don't follow that destined path, or we refuse to, and we continue on a path that does not serve the highest purpose of why we're here and what we're called to do in this world, in this lifetime, we often end up getting dis-ease in our body, whether, some sort of malnourishment, some sort of, physical ailment that shows up, some sort of emotional trauma that attracts itself to our experience, right? So I would caution anybody who's going through the motions of trying to get rid of the fungus in toenails. Be really, really careful about where your thoughts are and how those are, circling and circling and circling like the, what the heck are those things? Little rat, some sort of something on a wheel, right? They're just running in the same cycle, having those same words and phrases and images repeating in their head. And oftentimes those images will not be of the highest purpose path that they're here to serve. So they're probably on the negative side. They're probably on the side that does not serve what they're here to do. And in particular, on a runner, they have a lot of alone time. They have a lot of time to contemplate what's going on in their life and really analyze it. So when it shows up on their communication toes, which is their pointer finger toes, I'll show you this again, their air toes, what ends up happening is they end up having really negative communication. They end up having really negative experiences that they attract into their lives. And so it just doesn't serve the highest purpose path. So I'm going to read some of these comments and answer some of them. It was your neighbor. I'm a big vision girl. Yes, you are, Susie, and I love that about you. And I love that you're friends with people who are more detail oriented, because that's going to serve you well, my friend. Tracy Cox, I'm friends with Angelique too. She's amazing. I didn't see the first comment that said Angelique, but that's awesome. Very cool. That's super neat that you guys are connected that way. Luann Castillas, I'm not sure who that is, but welcome if you have joined us, Luann. So when it comes to communication and creativity, Susie just said, I love it. Grocery shopping with my accountant is comical because I'm an impulse buyer, and 99.99% of the time, accountants are not that. They are keeping track of every penny. They're looking at the ounces to, yeah, I think that would be like hair pulling out, kind of. At least it might, that's how it feels to me. I'd be like, Angelique is friends with Susie. Oh, that's so cool. That's so cool. So Susie, you and I work together, and Susie's in Arizona, and Tracy and Susie have known each other for decades. She has been a very close friend of mine for a long time. So that's so cool that you know each other. All right, let's take a quick look at these toes and talk a little bit about how these toes show up, okay? As you can see, the second toe, the air toe, actually all of the toes, the big toe is prominent, isn't it? The big toe on these feet is really about that big picture in life, right? So when I look at the other toes, I'm looking for where that big picture is serving. Oh, hi, Natasha. So glad you're here. Thank you so much for joining. So if you have any questions, we're talking about air toe and communication and creativities today, which is this second toe, the toe next to the big picture toe. So the big toe is one of these. So the big toe is all about the big picture or our destined path. And the second toe is about the air and how the air connects everything. It's, it's ether, air, fire, water, and earth. And with ether, we're talking destiny and big picture. And with air, we're talking communication, creativity, and analytical behavior. So when we look at these toes, I don't know if you guys can see this, but because the big toe is so much bigger than the rest of the toes, my first question to this person is, where do you feel like your destiny is overwhelming to you? Where do you feel like you struggle maybe a little bit with communication around it, with action around it, with relationships around it, with prosperity and abundance around it, right? Because that big picture is so important to this person. So even though these toes are absolutely stunningly beautiful, this person, as you know, struggles with her own challenges in life too, which, you know, I think is pretty awesome, in the sense that, you know, none of us, it doesn't matter what background, it doesn't matter what culture, it doesn't matter how we grew up, everybody has their struggles. Everybody is here to learn from each other and how we can show up better. Or at least that's my belief system. Funny, Angelique Talbert is one of my dearest friends. That's awesome. So cool. Yeah, that's so crazy that you guys are connected. I love it. Fantastic. Yay. Okay, so I wanted to talk a little bit about where communication can serve us really, really well in this lifetime, right? One of the things about communication and creativity and analytical behavior that will show up in life is how we present ourselves. How can we show up as the best version of ourselves in any scenario, even the scenarios that are like either knock us for a loop or put us in the middle of, you know, let's say somebody disagreeing or arguing. Maybe we're challenged with a coworker that we don't quite get along with, you know, that kind of thing. So, you know, all of that will show up in your communication toe, believe it or not. So when we're living too much in the future, the padding on our communication toes will be really, really heavy, or a lot heavier on this baby toe side of the toe, okay? And so this person has a lot of those future thoughts. So it would be my imagination that this person has a tendency to worry a lot. They have a tendency to be very scared. They live in that place of fear. And the best way to shift that is to, well, bring your thoughts, feelings, and emotions to the present tense, right? So when we think of like, oh my gosh, I don't know if I'm going to be able to pay rent this month, right? That's a big, overwhelming fear for a lot of people, especially the people who have struggled through the pandemic, right? Stuck at home, maybe they were fired, whatever's going on in their world, that future speak in our heads, the chatter that goes on, we can get stuck in that and we can get really overwhelmed by it. So when we're in this place of making sure that we're staying focused on the present moment rather than either too far out in the future or too far into the past, because the past doesn't serve us any better than the future does, right? Because the present is the only moment that exists. I mean, it seems obvious, but it's kind of hard to live that way, right? We have to plan, we have to make time, we have to make sure that we're not making the same mistakes. All that kind of stuff happens, right? But when we're too far in the future, we're going to worry ourselves to death. Quite literally. I mean, it will manifest itself as disease in our bodies if we're not careful. So the best way to deal with it is to really focus on where those thoughts, feelings, and emotions are showing up and how they're showing up, and focus on reframing them. So acknowledging that they're in the future or in the past is all that it takes to shift it to see to the present tense. So for example, I don't know how I'm going to pay rent is I am making I am taking steps to ensure that the universe has my back. I am taking steps to earn enough money and beyond to pay rent on time. That kind of thing, right? So I am acting in a way that is going to bring me more than enough to pay rent on time. Those kind of things. We can really shift that thought to call the universe into action to bring us what is needed and then some, right? And I know it seems silly to just reframe it that way, but not only is it empowering, it puts us in a state of control over something that feels out of our control, right? So, maybe your talent is walking on the beach and maybe you notice seashells everywhere you go. Okay, so take a paintbrush to them. Put them on eBay. You never know what somebody will pay for something until you try, right? Maybe I'm like, that's how my brain works. My brain is very, very entrepreneurial. So everything to me is an opportunity to have an income. Maybe you have 50,000 socks that Aunt Sally gave you for Christmas and you only wear 2 pairs of them. Time to put them on Craigslist or Facebook Marketplace or something so that you can thin down the stuff that might be even overwhelming you a little bit and create a little bit of extra income. Like simple things like that can really shift and make a difference in how we perceive what our control is over a situation that might feel out of control. So, I'll talk quickly about the left-right of these feet. Okay, so left-right. I probably should have done it upside down. Anyway, I love that these toes are different in color from toe to toe. Can you see that this is like or at least the way that it printed, it looks like a red, okay? And the other toes look like a blue, okay? So maybe this is right around the time of, 4th of July weekend, right? So one of the things that I would recognize in these feet is the color of the toes. So the fact that they're different tells me that she's focusing a lot more on the big picture in her life than she's focusing on the other. That's super neat that's where the focus is. In focusing on the big picture, she needs to be careful about not neglecting these other pieces of the pie. The air toe, which is communication, which is what we're talking about today. The middle toe is the action toe. The ring finger toe is about relationships. And the baby toe is the only one that's different from foot to foot. On the right side, it's about prosperity and abundance. On the left side, it's about faith and trust. So the other thing that I notice is that her left side is really straight across, like the padding on this darker toe is really straight across. Whereas the padding on this one is a little bit rounder, but it's also grabbing for the surface of the earth a little bit more. What that means for her is that because the toe is a dark color and it's a dark indigo, she's very focused on getting that somewhere between. Okay, so you can see in the color scheme, the ether and the destiny, somewhere between here and here is that indigo color, okay? So that indigo color shows up right there. As a chakra, that has to do with your third eye. So believe it or not, subconscious or not, she is focused on the big picture, but she's focused on the big picture having to do with her destined path and being more intuitive about it and trusting her instincts more and coming from that place of the all-knowing, powerful being that we all have within us as our highest self, right? So she just has to be careful about being really hard on herself and about not feeling secure in that. So how to shift that feeling of insecurity in the in trusting your intuition and trusting that third eye instinct is to practice it. And by practice it, I mean little things. Like, let's say you are, we'll just go back to the beach. Let's say we're walking on the beach and we're thinking about the latest, greatest relationship that we had, and maybe it went wrong, maybe it didn't go wrong, it doesn't matter. But in the big picture of our lives, what does that look like? How can we serve it better? How can we show up as our best selves for either the next relationship or in the relationship that we're currently in that's not going so great? And when our toe is toward the floor, we're focusing on the things that are going wrong. So when we start to focus on the things that are going right in whatever that looks like, whether it's a relationship, whether it's I don't know. I'm stumbling over my words right now, because when we start focusing on what we want as opposed to what we don't want, that's where it shows up there. That's where it straightens itself out. That's where things start gaining momentum in the positive direction. So just become super hyper aware of your words. Feel free to give your little toes little massages and tell them that you're grateful for all the information that they hold for you and for sharing it with you. And come back next week on next Tuesday at about 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time to join me for Toes Day next week, where we'll continue our discussion on communication and creativity and analytical behavior. And in the meantime, if you're interested in a private reading, just message me directly. Mwah. Thank you so much for being here. Bye for now.